Good Friday morning, and thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet, the voice you know with the news you trust studio, sponsored by BASF, where you can count on the trusted performance of Allivo seed treatment to protect your soybean crop. Under clear skies, it's a cold 3 degrees outside on the barn thermometer. With that light breeze, it makes it feel like it's in the negative single digits right now. It was nice to see the sunshine yesterday, and at least for the start of today, we should have clear skies and sunny. Be sure to bundle up if you're working outdoors. This quick programming note, be sure to tune in on Monday during the midday programming as we'll have our update from the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association. Taking a look at what's making agricultural headlines at ohioagnet.com, Kenyon College is the only university in the United States with their own land conservancy. You can read more about that. Also an article talking about the role of secondary and micronutrients and their importance when it comes to soil health. The dairy industry is highlighted in a story talking about how a single dairy cow can produce 1 ton of milk components. And Brianna Smith has a feature story dealing with popcorn production at New Vision Farm. Of course, the latest in weather and markets also available. All that at ohioagnet.com. In other agricultural headlines, farmers in regions prone to wet springs where prevented planting is a high risk will no longer have the option to buy up prevented planting coverage under a rule change issued by the USDA. Now, the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, or FCIC, last Friday published a rule to the Federal Register dubbed the Expanding Access to Risk Protection that made several changes to insurance policies, some of which were part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, while others were framed as streamlining or deregulation moves. Now, the FCIC sets crop insurance rules for USDA's Risk Management Agency, the RMA, to administer, and most of the provisions in the rules help farmers and clarify crop insurance policy rules, but one provision stands out as eliminating a coverage option. That rule eliminated the ability for farmers to increase their prevented planting coverage. Now, prevented planting coverage is part of every crop insurance policy, but farmers have been given the option in the past to increase prevented planting coverage by 5 to 10%. The USDA then reduced it, so farmers were limited to a 5% buy-up on the prevented planting. Now, under the rule, the FCIC posted that buy-up for prevented planting not only benefits mainly farmers in North Dakota and South Dakota, but isn't needed because Congress will take care of those producers with an ad hoc payment later on. Well, let's get a check on your Friday and through the weekend weather forecast now. Today's forecast brought to us by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com.
Dry air continues to hold over the state of Ohio for your Friday. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin. Let's take a look at your forecast update. Even though it's dry, it is cold. As you're waking up this morning, yikes, wind chills down well below zero. Now, the good news is the high pressure centered over northwest Ohio last night up to the midnight hour. So as it moves away to the east, we are already starting to see winds try and turn to more of a south and southwesterly direction. Problem is, we're not going to get instantaneous warming with this. It's going to take a little bit to try and moderate our temperatures. So we're chilly today, quite chilly, and chilly into the weekend as well. I think we're dry for all of Saturday with decent sunshine potential. Sunday, we see the remains of a clipper system trying to move through, likely just clouds, but it brings a reinforcing shot of cold air to start the week. High pressure is here on Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and at this point, let's throw Friday in 2 waves at least of snow coming through, coming from the northwest, racing down into the eastern Corn Belt. The third could be the wild card for Friday. Either way, we're looking at accumulating snow again through the week next week before we turn things around and start to see some significant warming. That warming happens late the weekend of the 13th and 14th, probably comes with some rain, but what you need to know is the fact that we're going to probably get pretty doggone sloppy here, pretty muddy as temperatures go back above normal for that week of the 15th. That's the way your forecast is stacking up. I'm meteorologist Ryan Martin.
Thanks, Ryan. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more after this.
When you combine the advanced technology of Enlist E3 soybeans with Seed Consultants' dedication to performance in the Eastern Corn Belt, it's a simply better experience. Our Seed Consultants brand soybeans are hand-selected, tested, and proven to perform in your conditions, backed by the local knowledge of Seed Consultants sales professionals. Bind to better soybeans with reliability and results packed into every variety. Visit seedconsultants.com.
Hi, I'm Greg Peterson of the Peterson Farm Brothers. If you've seen our videos, you know we're proud to be farmers. Farming can be dangerous. Never assume location or depth of underground utilities or pipelines. Before you start any work on your farm, call 811 or visit clickbeforeyoudig.com to have underground lines located. It only takes a minute and can save your life.
Never assume the location or depth of underground lines. Always call 811 or visit clickbeforeyoudig.com before you start work. A message from the Pipeline Operators for Ag Safety campaign.
We're at the Ohio Soybean Hometown Tour today, and I am visiting with Brianna Metz. She is with the U.S. Soy Export Council, or USEC. Brianna, thanks so much for your time today. You just gave a presentation to a group of Ohio farmers about the work of USEC and really interesting all the different facets that USEC is involved in. But with that, you highlighted some different countries, and especially looking to the future where we see beans moving. Obviously, a lot of the talk has been about China and the relatively virtually no beans that have really moved that direction compared to what normally does. But a lot of other exciting things going on in terms of other countries importing our beans. Share a little bit of where those are moving to in the coming years and some of the neat growth that we've seen.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was really a wonderful opportunity to be here today to talk to the Ohio farmers about kind of where we see beans and meal going, not only out of the U.S., but ultimately out of the Ohio area. And when we look at whole beans, there's kind of two ways to look at this: whole beans and soybean meal. And when we look at whole beans, we really see Egypt is a huge market of opportunity for the U.S. They kind of entered the market in 2018 as a market for U.S. soybeans, whole beans specifically, due to their growing poultry production and their growing desire to export poultry to their own surrounding countries and the European Union. And so what we see is that over the years and the relationships we've built, Egypt has a very clear preference for U.S. soy. They like the quality, they like the way it crushes, they like the soybean meal that ultimately results from that as a feed ingredient. And so we see as their demand is growing, as their population is growing, that they also have a growing preference for U.S. soy. And so we see them just in the first 7 weeks of the marketing year 25-26 have purchased almost 1 million metric tons of soybeans so far. And so that is a market that is easily served out of the Gulf, where many Ohio soybeans go down the river, out of the Ohio River down to the Mississippi, and really out of that New Orleans Gulf area. Egypt buys mostly out of there. And so those beans are headed down the river and headed to a market that is very important for U.S. soy. Another market we've seen come online really massively in the last couple of weeks would be Bangladesh. They just recently signed a memorandum of understanding and a letter of intent to purchase $1.25 billion worth of U.S. soy and soybean meal over the next 12 months. And what that means is that market obviously has a growing middle class and a growing demand for protein. And so most of that is going into poultry feed. And what we see is that they need high protein raw feed ingredients, and soybean meal is sitting there ready to be that feed ingredient for them. And they have a growing crush industry. And so they serve as a market that imports both meal and whole beans. And so there really is a lot of opportunity there for U.S. soy.
One thing you mentioned, I think, that I didn't realize, Bangladesh has a huge population globally.
Yeah, so Bangladesh, and I kind of said it earlier, I didn't know this until I was doing some research, has the 5th largest population in the world. And so with a growing population, and their population is expected to continue to grow, there is a growing demand for protein among their people. And so with that, more protein demand from a consumer means more protein on the shelves, which means there needs to be more protein in the animal diet. And we see what we call a protein pool all the way from the consumer back down to the raw feed ingredient. We see more demand for protein from a consumer standpoint, which means more live animal production, which means more feed ingredients that they have to source. And U.S. soy is there, and there is a preference building in Bangladesh where they want to source U.S. soybean meal, whether it's crushed in market or imported as soybean meal.
Talk about Southeast Asia, an area that's interested in U.S. soy and also growing population. And something I didn't realize is maybe the pull-through where there's certain countries in Southeast Asia that are buying our beans, further processing them, and then shipping them back out as well.
Yeah, so what we see in Southeast Asia is that One, a lot of what I talked about today is a growing middle class around the world and growing populations, and more money means really more protein from a consumer standpoint. And Southeast Asia has some of the world's largest growing economies, even within the Southeast Asia market. Areas like Indonesia and the Philippines are growing consistently, and so they have more need for raw ingredients and raw feed ingredients to meet their people or meet the needs of their people. And what we also see in those markets is that they eat soy foods, which means that while Egypt and Bangladesh are great markets for U.S. soy, it's mostly used for animal utilization. In Southeast Asia, soy foods are traditional, and so they're utilizing U.S. soy for soy food production, for soy beverage production, and then also from the animal utilization standpoint. And so in many cases, those markets are bringing in soybean meal. They're processing it as in feeding animals or creating soy foods or soy beverages, and then they're actually exporting those finished products that were made with U.S. soy and soybean meal to other markets around Southeast Asia.
Great information, and nice to know that we've got USSEC working on our behalf with all this. Again, my guest today has been Brianna Metz with the U.S. Soy Export Council. Brianna, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be back to take a look at your markets after this.
Attention farmers and ranchers, Purple Wave's December 30th Ag Auction features top equipment from Basigio Farms LLC Retirement Auction in Gordon, Nebraska. Upgrade your operation with our 2022 John Deere S770 STS Combine, Farm King 2450 Bale Mover, and a powerful 2020 John Deere 8R S10 MFWD Tractor. This is your chance to acquire field-ready machinery that performs, all selling at absolute no reserve to the highest bidder. Visit purplewave.com to view detailed listings and inspection information. Purple Wave Auctions, straight, simple, sold.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
It's time now for today's market analysis, brought to you by the Louis Dreyfus Company. Excited to be building the newest state-of-the-art soybean crush facility in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. Call 574-566-2113 for information on soybean marketing to LDC.
Grain markets finishing mostly higher on Thursday. Now we're set to finish the week, and today may make or break how the week goes overall. Yesterday, corn up about 3 to 4 cents, beans up 2 to 3 cents. Bean meal was mixed and not much either way. Bean oil up about 9 to 18 points. Wheat markets in Chicago up 2 to 3. Kansas City up about 4 to 5. And that was pretty much all she wrote. What were the stories in the marketplace yesterday? Well, Canadian wheat and canola crops surged following the Stats Canada harvest report. There were no daily soybean flesh sales announced yesterday, and grain rallies seemed to come under a little bit of pressure as we went through the afternoon hours. The overall thought here was there's no new demand. There is a expected and large Chinese cash soybean demand coming, but we heard from Secretary Bessent yesterday, well, probably overnight into yesterday morning, that the deadline for Chinese purchases is not the end of this calendar year, by the end of February. So we're kicking that can down the road a little bit, and that means there's hope of Chinese demand and rising South American meal values supporting Board of Trade soybean futures going forward. Brokers estimate that money managers purchased about 4,300 soybean contracts yesterday, 2,900 meal contracts, a net 1,500 corn. Funds sold 3,200 wheat. So even though we were a little bit stronger, the wheat was sold. Stats Canada forecast came in with the Canadian wheat and canola crops at record large levels, well above early season satellite images. The Canadian wheat crop put at 40 million metric tons, 3 million above last year. The canola crop, 21.8 million metric tons, 2.5 larger than last year. That argues that China's absence as a Canadian canola buyer will become more significant in future pricing. The Canadian crop estimates are final and expected to be accepted by the WASDE that comes out, here our WASDE, next Tuesday. I'm Ryan Martin.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, let's take a look now at how your markets closed yesterday, brought to us by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance, online at seedconsultants.com. March corn closed up 3 3/4 cents, and May corn was up 3 3/4. January soybeans closed the day up 3 3/4 cents, with March beans up 3 1/4. March Kansas City wheat closed the day up 4 1/2 cents, while March Chicago wheat was up 2 cents, and March Minneapolis wheat was down 3 1/4. Taking a look at the overnight trade, March corn is down 1/2 penny at $4.46 3/4 cents. March soybeans are down 1.5 pennies at $11.27 1/4 cents, and wheat for July is down 1/4 penny at $5.55. Have a great day, everyone. This is the Ohio AgNet.